So that is this one. So. Yeah, it's like I said. Yeah. So you can just bring it. Oh, we're pretty. That wasn't working over here. Check one, check two. Check one.
This one work?
Check one, check the other.
I guess tonight. So is this your okay?
Okay, it is 5:30. We'll call this meeting of Public Works Highway Committee to order. Roll call shows all members are in attendance except for Trustee Bob, who is at another event tonight and could not make it. He is absent and excused. I'll entertain approval of the minutes from the 5th of June.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
Any changes to the minutes? Any comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Moving on to public comment. Anybody who would like to speak on anything pertinent to Public Works, please feel free to come up to the podium, press the button really hard to make the red light go away, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Maybe 30 seconds. Melanie Smythe, N140W17938 Cedar Lane. I just wanted to say that I really appreciate all the work that Public Works is putting into the 5-year plan, the tree plan, all the other work that's going on. I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. We've been asking for that 5-year plan for many years now, and it's just really tremendous to see it. It's going to help the village a lot. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to come up?
I'll get you a ticket. Oh, I thought they were here. Sorry. Jan Miller. I just have a couple of comments. W151 and 10297 Winsong Circle West. I'd also like to thank the oh my God, that's weird. The Public Works and Highways Committee and our director for putting together this timely tree program. And I just wanted to mention that I did reach out to many people that are interested in this program. And because of the holiday, they weren't able to make it. So you might not get as many comments as you anticipated. And then also, thanks for your hard work on the director's report as well as the 5-year plan. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about it. But I hope that you can extend comments for the tree program for about a month or until next month's meeting so that we can get a little bit better participation. Thank you.
Like to come forward? Seeing there's no one, we will move on to new business. And the first topic is the comprehensive tree plan review and discussion. Bearing in mind, this is just a draft for discussion and will very likely be back at this committee potentially with some changes or whatever. Matt?
Okay, so with the addition of right-of-way tree pruning that came up in the last year in subdivisions as opposed to tree pruning that was happening on main streets and parks and that sort of thing, there were some issues and complications with how that was rolled out in terms of communication, in terms of expectations of the community. And earlier this spring or last winter, I suppose, the Public Works Committee directed the department to come up with a tree plan before proceeding with any additional work. So that is what we did. And then also just taking a look at the ordinance, there's 17.60, which kind of guides what the tree plan should be. And if you take a look at that, it outlines that there should be a tree plan and it should include administrating a written plan, and I'm going to kind of quote it here, for care, preservation, pruning, planting, replanting, removal, or disposition of trees and shrubs in parks, along streets, and other public places. So that's essentially what we developed here. And the draft copy was attached to this agenda item. I wanted to outline just a few of the areas in the plan that I think might be worth some discussion, and then turn it over to folks to discuss. The first is that it outlines a different approach that we would take for urban tree care and rural tree care, with urban being much more focused on inventory, on contracted work that we would hire for the tree care, and using technology such as GIS to document what we've done. The rural approach, that's something that would more typically be handled by staff, be kind of directed by observations that staff had made, and prioritizing work according to staff availability and resources. So that's one interesting point, I think, in the plan. The next is a tree planting cycle. So we have a number of vacant urban plots that do not have trees. And the plan proposes a cycle to plant all of those remaining plots over a 5-year period. In addition, the plan outlines a revised tree list. There's been a list that has been incorporated into planning documents in the village for quite some time. But part of what the plan proposes and what like the village forester, Nathan, who works for Wachtell, recommends is that we have greater diversity in our street trees. And hence we need a bigger list of trees in order to accomplish that. It also proposes a pruning cycle for urban trees. Right now, it's based on funding, but we're probably at about I don't know what, 15-year cycle or so. And it proposes bringing that down more in line to what's recommended in a 7 to 8 year. And I think the plan actually proposes just starting off with a 9-year pruning cycle. It proposes changes to the permit process. So one of the things that was discussed a couple months ago when this came up before the committee was, perhaps homeowners associations could be more responsible for the care of their trees. And under the plan now, this proposes a way to make that work through the permit process and still under the supervision of the Department of Public Works. In addition, the plan talks about the tree board. So it was discussed at the same time that there should be citizen participation in planning for all the various aspects of village trees. And the current ordinance actually discusses a tree board. So this plan attempts to identify what the makeup of that board would be and some of the scope of different things that they could have authority over. And then lastly, the plan outlines, what community outreach would look like for the different types of activities that we're doing, whether it's planting or pruning or removing trees, et cetera. But it's just providing some expectations for citizens on what to expect from Public Works, and also providing guidance for Public Works on how they should be interacting with citizens when it comes to trees. So I think those are the highlights, and be happy to facilitate the discussion if there is any.
Matt, for people who haven't seen this, who might be watching, could you talk a little bit about the tree board and how you see it now? Because that would help us kind of everybody understand how that might work.
I can pull it up here too. It's towards the end, but essentially the way it's proposed in here, and I just kind of see this entire plan as a proposal right now, up, subject to whatever modifications folks feel is necessary. But what it proposes is that there is a 3-person tree board, and I'm having trouble getting down there and closer. It's the permit section. So there, the tree board. And on the screen, you can see it proposes how the membership of the board would work, that there would be a village trustee member, that the village forester would be a member, and that a citizen from the village of Germantown who has some experience with tree care would be a member, and that they would serve a couple-year term. They would be appointed by the president And that for the most part that they would have an advisory role. They would review the annual plan for the coming year. So if we were planning a pruning or planting operation, we would talk about that with the tree board at the one meeting they would have like to schedule. And they would review that and advise the Public Works Committee. And then the other item that they would consider is any appeals of decisions related to trees that came from staff. So if there was a determination made about a tree that a citizen disagreed with, they could appeal to the tree board and the tree board could make a decision. That authority actually exists in the ordinance as it stands right now. So I think depending on how things shake out, we could potentially be looking at modifying ordinances to match the plan and vice versa.
Okay. And the other thing too, I think that the public would be most interested in is communication. Before we do anything, how, if you could just, I know it's in the program here, but if you could just speak to that a little bit too, please.
Yeah, I mean, so there's this section that's fairly brief on plan review and community outreach. But it just says that we are going to reach out using, various different avenues. We're going to use letters and we're going to send those out preceding work. And it says here by a minimum of 3 weeks. That we'll use social media to announce all work and that we'll announce all work on the village website as well. And then it just, in addition to what's in like this section of the plan, there's various communication aspects that are talked about throughout the plan, and different like levels of communication. So if we were removing one tree, maybe we would do a very limited communication with an adjacent property owner. But if we were removing 5 trees or 10 trees, perhaps there's a different level of outreach that would be needed with the subdivision or a group of citizens. So it would be kind of scaled like that based on kind of the impact and size of the project.
Okay. Committee?
Just a couple comments. First, thank you. Second, great work. And then a question about replacement trees and trees in the right of way. So no maple trees of any kind in the right of way for the village, I noticed.
I would have to look at the list a little more carefully for that. It's possible. Just looking through here quick. Those are the evergreens.
Lot of oaks.
Yeah.
But I did notice that, and I'm sure there's a reason for that. And then secondly, so if I understand correctly, if a citizen or a resident plants a tree in the right of way, it's considered a donation or a contribution to the village.
Right.
And does that also require a permit or no? I was a little confused.
It would, yeah. So anything that goes in the right of way would require a permit, or any work, whether it's planting, pruning, treating a tree, you name it, whatever you're going to do with that tree in the right of way would require a permit.
And if Phil, who is a big fan of maple trees, for example, plants a maple tree in the right of way, are we going to let that sit until it's time to address it? I assume that we're not going to go around and police trees.
Well, I think the intent would be that we would have some sort of inspection program for permits that are issued to ensure that they're planted appropriate distances away from the road, away from corners, that they were planted according to the standards that are outlined in the plan.
Is the enforcement of that realistic, Matt? I mean, I know we've got GIS, but
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll depend on how frequent it becomes.
okay, thank you. Again, nice.
Yeah, a couple things. When I was reading this looks like you developed a standard operating procedure for internal use for the most part, right? I mean, there's some things that the residents will use out of this, but for the most part, this is how Public Works is going to utilize our tree program. Is that how you see this being used?
I see it kind of serving both purposes. I think it is definitely a guide for Public Works on how to perform, our work related to trees. But it's also kind of setting expectations for residents on what they can expect from us. Now, I know there have been comments about perhaps, having this be more of like an internal document and producing something that's more public facing. My only comment is I would hate to, shorten something and have it miss some type of communication that somebody felt was important.
Yeah, I think, having this available to the public is good.
Yeah.
I just read it as more of, here's our standard procedures that's going to happen, which is, again, that's great. We've never had a plan like this. I did have a question on the permits, similar to what Phil had, and that is that we have language in there that allows residents to prune in right of way or things that are in the right of way. What is the outcome if that isn't pruned correctly? If something is, worst case is damaged or they don't do it correctly, what is the fallout for that? Is there any code that deals with that?
Yeah, there's existing language in 17.6 about permits and enforcement. So I think the very last section of, got this a little bit out of order here, but it talks about penalties. Any person violating any provision of this section shall be, upon conviction or plea of guilty, subject to some fines. So first
Okay.
offense is a fine of $250.
Fines or restitution or something like that,
Yeah, but I think, our approach probably would be to try to get the work corrected if possible. And work with the citizen to resolve the issue instead of, jumping
Absolutely.
to fines.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it could potentially make things more complicated for us. Because it doesn't resolve the issue of like a disagreement between the village and a citizen about what needs to happen to their tree. It's just that the citizen has a little bit more leeway and control over what would happen in those permitted instances.
Okay.
But ultimately, according to the existing ordinance and the plan, the village retains all their rights associated with the trees.
I wasn't aware that that we had municipal code for a tree board, and I'm glad we do. I think that's a fantastic idea, and to have that makeup is perfect. And I can't wait to see the first meeting of that. So thanks.
I think a lot of this applies more to the suburban and subdivision type scenarios. I mean, out where I live, there's trees probably growing in the right way. I didn't put them there. Mother Nature put them there. But I'm I agree with Phil. I would like to know why there aren't any maples on there, if there's some big disease or some weird issue going on with that, because I think a lot of people really love that kind of tree.
I think my guess on that is that, and this list was provided by the village forester, by Wachtel. My guess on that is that it's a very common tree and is probably widely planted across the village. And if our goal is a certain amount of diversity, we probably
makes
have to
sense.
move away from that to some degree.
Okay. I think this is, I like comprehensive. To me, comprehensive is a great starting point. You can always move things around and tweak them, but it's nice to have all of this in one place where we can review it. And I think it's great that it's something that the Public Works Department can follow into the future, and the tree board can maybe even, once we seat that, which I presume would be maybe by fall, prior to any tree work, or?
I guess that's something that we'll have to look at. I think my plan, because this came up with the holiday right before it, and attendance isn't maybe what it would typically be on a night like tonight. I'll continue to gather comments and we did
That's great.
did
Yeah.
put it out on social media and ask people and the website, trying to seek feedback. So I'd be happy to receive any feedback that does come in through the end of July. And then in August, that first week of August, I'd try to kind of incorporate any changes and present the plan again to Public Works for approval. And then we'd go to the village board for approval
Mhm.
after that, provided, there weren't any changes that you were
Mhm.
requiring of me tonight, that would be like major rewrites where we'd have to kind of.
I personally have nothing significant that I would rewrite on here. I will really enjoy seeing what the community, our constituents think about it when they give us some feedback. And so we can expect to have this on the agenda probably in August, because I'm guessing we are trying to get this done for fall planting.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, we do have fall activities. They would have typically been spring planting
Mhm.
activities, but we've pushed them off in order to do this first. So we would like to get approval in August and then potentially even that same meeting have an item like pending approval of the plan for enacting some planting and potentially pruning as well.
Okay. Any more comments? This is for discussion only, so. It's, thanks again, Matt. I think this is great. It's way beyond the start. It's very comprehensive and good. We'll move on to new business B, 5-year capital improvement plan.
Move another document onto the screen here, if I can. Almost goes the opposite way you would expect. So this was attached to the packet, but I noticed when I printed it out, it was very hard to read. So I've got it here on the screen. This is something that Steve and Matthew, myself, and other department heads put together in the last couple months or so. It outlines a plan for capital spending. This is kind of like you can look at it as what we need. It's not you approving the capital budget for the year, but this is just kind of higher level. What is the village looking at in the coming 5 years? And I can't speak with 100% knowledge on all the departments, but I can outline what I think are some of the highlights.
If I may, I think being the Public Works Committee, that's where we want to focus. So I would just highlight that and pull things out of there because we have no impact on the rest of it. That'd be up to the board and the separate committees.
Okay, so just kind of on a tangent, I guess, related to Public Works, because we'd have involvement, is there's funding proposed in here for the police, fire, public safety building or buildings, with design in 25 and construction in 26. Moving down then to wastewater, we have a new facilities plan that has been developed by Rukert and Milky. That's going to be going to the Utility Advisory Committee as soon as I can get a meeting scheduled for that, probably in July, and then to Public Works in August. But some of the results of what are in that plan are reflected in here. And what I wanted to bring to folks' attention is that the plan outlines upgrades that may be required at Old Farm Lift Station, at Main Street Lift Station, and then going a little farther out in the plan, a consolidation of Lift 3 and Lift 6. So going from 2 lift stations to 1, but in a new location. So those are some of the bigger ticket items in this 5-year plan for the wastewater utility. The water utility, we've gone through kind of a mad dash of projects here in the last couple of years, and according to this, things do quiet down some. We do have a well 7 rehab for 2025. And some work on some curb stops on Mayflower, Northway, Colonial, and Concord that are not functioning. And then a small relay there as well. Scroll down to engineering. Here, the big thing is Division Road. So we've got kind of a 2-year outlay there for design and construction of Division Road. We're kind of picturing that happening in a 2-year cycle where we do like a southern leg of it and then a northern leg of it. We've had some community meetings. We had the first one a couple weeks ago. And based on some of that initial feedback, they were kind of presented with a low end, quick, mill and overlay type approach, kind of an intermediate approach that involved pulverize and reconstruct, potentially some more curbs, some pathway improvements, things like that. And then they were also presented with kind of a high end, making Division Road look more like Pilgrim Road. And the opinion based on the surveys and the folks that were in attendance that night was pretty strongly like for that middle option. So that's kind of what's presented here in the budget, or not in the budget, but in the plan. You'll notice also in engineering, this might actually get shifted back into streets, but it's really just semantics, I think, on where it sits in the budget. But we are proposing some increases to road funding. This year, we were able to commit all of the road program dollars, and based on conditions, and it's something that I actually will touch on a little bit later tonight with the last item on the agenda. I think that additional funding is something that the committee and the board should consider for the road program.
Is that the seal coating in particular I'm looking at here?
The line I
Or-
highlighted is the road, like the neighborhood road reconstruction program.
Okay,
Seal coating is the line below that. We highlight that one if you're looking at your monitor.
mm-hmm,
So this year we had $250,000 for seal coating. That was cut about $100,000. We're proposing that go back up to the $350,000 level for a couple of years and then actually kind of grow that a little bit over time, just more or less to keep up with inflation. Equipment is something that's in the utility budgets and in the streets budget. Kind of pared back on the equipment that we're requesting for this coming year for 2025. But I plan to work with staff on an equipment plan that'll basically bring together the utilities and the highway department and take a strong look at what we have, what do we need, what are life cycles of the equipment, and come up with a kind of a comprehensive plan that could change some of this down the road. So what I would concentrate on when it comes to equipment requests is just what we have for next year. And next year in highway, we're just looking at purchasing one plow truck. All right, I'm going to scroll down a little bit then.
what about the skid loader? Is that not for next year?
Sorry, where?
I'm under street and highway. I see the plow truck. Tandem truck is 276. And then there's a compact loader, skid loader at 120.
That is actually 2024. So
Oh, okay. Oh, that's this year, I see, yeah.
2024 is the column on the left, 25 is
Yeah.
the second from the left, then going out to 2029 on the end.
So just the plow truck, that's good.
And that does kind of defer, a couple of the things that show up in later years down here in the plan were probably originally scheduled for 2025. But I think based on feedback of what we can expect out of the budget year and then a desire just to plan things out more properly, that stuff for the out years is subject to change a little bit. All right, then I was going to go down. One of the areas that really required a lot of work in putting this together was just the needs of some of the buildings. We have a report from Grafe, who did a study on all the different maintenance and capital improvements that are needed in facilities over the next 5 to 10 years. And I attempted to capture some of that stuff. In some cases, I grouped a series of smaller repairs into a larger repair. So it's one item on 1 year as opposed to 3 smaller items on 3 years. And then also working with Scott on other items, other projects that he knew about were necessary in facilities. So this is quite a bit more built out than it's been in previous years, and is probably adding to the bottom line of the plan ultimately as well. Otherwise, I guess what I'd say about it, I'm going to just flip back up to engineering. Sorry, this is kind of back and forth a little bit, but I really want to concentrate on for public works, for planning, understanding what do we have, what condition are these assets in, and then how do we have like kind of a systematic program to deal with it over time. So you can see, you know, we're proposing some dollars are spent on getting a better understanding in our GIS system of all the traffic signals and signs that we own, and those inventoried and conditioned, and the PACER rating that's developed becoming a visual layer in our GIS. When we're looking at the water utility, having a facilities plan done to understand, much like we just completed with the sewer utility, what's needed and what can we anticipate is going to be needed out of the water utility in the coming years. And then the same sort of thing with stormwater. Right now, this is a really difficult topic for us because we don't get a lot of funding for stormwater, but we have a lot of infrastructure, and we get probably more complaints about stormwater and drainage than anything else. We need to understand here, you know, there's an item about system inventory condition assessment, which would probably be done with some cammering and GIS updates, and then looking at funding options. It says utility feasibility analysis, but really it's, you know, how can we potentially fund, you know, the maintenance and repairs that are needed on all of our stormwater infrastructure. So that's, I guess, my summary, and be happy to answer any questions about that.
Committee? Another really good summary. Thank you for this. I have a quick question about the stormwater, because I know what's looming in the future on that. Because you cannot use money, it has to come out of the general fund for this.
Right.
Can't be water department, can't be sewer department, even if storm sewers or whatever are overflowing. And unfortunately, a lot of communities are going to that stormwater tax. I'm not sure exactly what the right phraseology is for that, but that is something that is looming in the future.
Yeah, you know, we have a lot of stormwater infrastructure. If it's a retention pond, if it's, you know, pipes in the ground, but just in the last couple of weeks with all the rain, we have a couple different little issues with road surfaces giving way where there's some bad drainage or some stormwater infrastructure that's in disrepair. So it definitely doesn't last forever, and a lot of it's been in the ground for quite a while at this point. So it's definitely something out there that the village needs to consider.
And it's expensive, and hopefully we don't have to deal with it in the near future. Any other comments or questions, Rick?
My initial thought is this is great. Going out 5 years is going to make it much easier come budget time when we have those parking lot items, et cetera, et cetera. Can we do this? Can't we do this? It's also a little scary. You know, when we look at the total for 2025, less the wastewater and the water utility, it's over $9 million. And we're typically borrowing about 3. Now, some of it will come out of operating, but we're either going to have to postpone or borrow a lot, or a combination. But get ready, because this is going to be a big year.
Yeah, I mean, it would be amazing if we could fund everything at this level, but that's probably not the reality.
Right. Right,
And-
this is a guideline, I get it, and this is things that are needed.
Mhm.
So a couple things, I don't want to get into the weeds too far, but I see that Pleasant View Road has a couple things that are coming up and it has WisDOT on it with ARIP. Is that a incentive type thing or a grant?
That is a grant. It's a 50/50 grant that we could apply for. So we would need to receive funding for the full amount and then get reimbursed for up to half of the project.
Okay,
But we do plan to submit for that.
and then not to get into Paisley ratings too far, but Maple Road south of I-41, 45 and all the way to Appleton Avenue is pretty bad. It's starting to sink into the swamp, so
That was bad.
I didn't see that anywhere on this list. And I thought, that's
Yeah.
got to be addressed sooner or later.
No, that's actually a 2024 project.
Oh, it is?
Yep.
Oh, fantastic.
So
Right.
we're just trying to get final signatures on the contract and, hopefully within a month or so, we'll be able to work on that.
That's great. Okay, thank you. That was all my
Really good.
questions.
Bill, anything? Okay, this is information only, I presume? Okay,
Actually, Administrator Krecklow would like for approval on this and to advance it to
the board?
To the board, yep.
Make a motion to approve the 5-year capital outlay plan.
I'll second.
motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Leave it at the board.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Okay, moving on to report of emergency repair to water tower number 1.
Yeah, so as the write-up says, staff identified a leak going back 3 weeks or maybe even a month ago in the fill pipe going up tower number 1. It started out as kind of a smaller little leak, but grew a little bit over time
That's how they do it.
and damaged some of the equipment that was at the bottom of the tower, some of the control equipment, and made things pretty wet and made staff pretty nervous for a couple of weeks. But we were able to engage a contractor pretty quickly that was working on Tower 3, doing that rehab project for us that had the capabilities to get up there. This is probably, what would you say, Paul, 100 feet up in the air where this leak was occurring. To get the rigging and get up there and remove the insulation, find the leak, repair the leak, and then restore things the way they were. So that's work that we couldn't go through the normal approval channels and we just had to get done based on the nature of it and timing. So this is just a report that we did do that work. There's the one invoice from Seven Brothers for $9,800 and then another $3,000 invoice for materials.
Just one quick question. Is this a long-term fix or is this a temporary?
I mean, it's long enough term of a fix where when we get to this tower rehab in a few years, that we'll be able to address it then.
Okay.
We're comfortable with the fix lasting that amount of time.
Okay, we'll move on to D, awarding the contract to relay water main in various locations to Vinton Construction of Manitowoc, Wisconsin, in the amount of $440,000, $444,983.
Yeah, so this is for water main in the Glenwood Park subdivision and then around Hilbert Lane and Sylvan Circle. That intersection, it's being upgraded for a couple of different reasons. One is the experience of issues in service and breaks in these areas. It's also improving service to these areas and providing service in a couple of instances on, let me get the street here. On Shagbark, oh no, I'm sorry, on School Road. It'll connect and provide more of a looping effect, which is always better for service. And because of that, we'll be bringing water across 6 properties that didn't previously have service that would now be able to hook up to water if they wanted to. That, and then also addressing fire flow issues as well, providing greater flow to those areas. So
Committee?
we got the 5 bids. Vinton was low. We're working with Vinton on a couple other projects right now. We have no issues with them. So we're asking for the contract to be awarded to them with 10% contingency. With the contingency, the total would be $489,480.80.
Make a motion to award the relay water main contract to Vinton Construction, including a 10% contingency in the amount of $489,480.80.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? We'll vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. E, award a contract for final design and bid services of the High Point Pass Road construction to R.A. Smith in the amount not to exceed $82,000.
So this is for design and bid services for construction of High Point Pass. This is from Holy Hill Road south to the railroad track. And right now it's a private drive. This is one of the TID projects that was approved earlier this year. We were actually going to bring this item last time, a month ago. But because some of the developments related to the Richfield project, we had to understand exactly how that was going to impact this project. Now we're comfortable enough with where we're at and things have settled out. So we can proceed with getting the final design and getting this project ready to go. The idea would be to start the design right away, bid this project over the winter and begin construction as early as possible in the spring. It will be needed in order to provide access to the truck country development, because the new driveway for the truck country development will be south of Holy Hill Storage, which is a ways down from the intersection of Holy Hill Road.
I'll move approval of the contract to R.A. Smith on a time and materials basis in the amount not to exceed 82,000 against TID 8 and the 3 accounts listed.
Second.
Further questions for Matt or discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Road program funding and effectiveness, for discussion only.
Yeah, so I just put together a little memo that kind of highlights the need for some of the increased funding that we were just talking about in the road program. And I just went back over the last 5 years and put some numbers together. But if you just look at some of the graphs, you can kind of see how with the 1.5 million that we've been spending being kind of a static number and not changing over the past number of years. And then on top of that, the inflation that's taken place, we've gotten kind of less and less accomplished with that amount of money. So just looking at the dollars required per mile of reconstruction from 2019 to 2023 has gone up pretty dramatically, more than doubled, where our funding has stayed the same. So, I mean, that's been a crazy amount of inflation, and there's some signs that maybe that's cooled off a little bit because we have had some decent bids this year. But you know, we're definitely playing catch up with numbers like that. And then flipping to the second page of the memo, the calculation on the road replacement cycle is definitely headed in the wrong direction. As you can see there, the 5-year average is that we're replacing roads beyond 50 years. And if you just took the average using 2023, it would be over 80-year replacement cycle. So we definitely want to at least get that leveled out and kind of turn down in the right direction. And then that last graph is the miles of road that are replaced every year. Because I've said the budget has stayed static over the last couple of years. And with that inflation, we've been able to kind of do less and less over time. So that's just my little pitch that come budget time, and you'll see that request for additional funding in the road program that I think it's something the village really needs to consider. The last graph isn't much of a graph. It just kind of plots out where the PACER rating is for the village. And it's sitting around 5.7 right now. It's been below 6 for quite some time. But going back to 2014, it was 5.85, and it's kind of just been on a slow downward trend since then.
Do you attribute most of the situation to the inflation?
Yeah. I think so.
Okay, so we can have some hope there. Unless somebody has a money tree or we're gonna have one really big bake sale, it's gonna be very difficult to increase this funding significantly. I mean, that's realistic. Bill?
Let's stay away from the bake sale. So, Paisley rating has not gone down what I would consider to be significantly, which is, I think, good news. Everywhere I go in the state of Wisconsin, exactly the same issues. How do our roads stack up against municipalities that are approximately our size, Matt?
That's a good question. I don't have an answer. I would suspect, like you said, that a lot of communities are in the same or similar situations. So I think, we have to get creative about how we're reconstructing our roads too. And I think we have to be willing to take advantage of other grant programs. I think we have to, potentially, use the TID dollars that are available to do roads in those areas. And I think, like I'm suggesting here, the actual road program funding probably needs to increase a little bit over time just to try to keep up. But yeah, I think, most municipalities our size are probably in similar situations. That's my guess.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Rick, any other comments?
Not really, no.
And this was information only, correct?
Informational, yep.
Okay, so we'll move on to the director's report. What would you like to highlight, Matt?
All right, I will talk first about well 12. Where the village board a couple of weeks ago approved some additional testing that we'd requested. I don't have final results from that testing, but it has taken place over the last 3 days. And the initial feedback is that things are fairly positive there, and that we think we can deal with both the production, the quantity of water that we need, and the condition of the water. Probably, and this will remain to be seen by finalizing the report and getting full results of the test, but probably just using that lowest aquifer that had the biggest volume and also had the cleanest water by lining off the upper two. So if that does end up being the recommendation, what I would anticipate is that the liner that would be used to line off those upper two fractures would be presented as a change order to the well house construction contract. So it's possible that by next month, we would be presenting that for approval, if that's how everything shakes out. And then I think just for transparency's sake, we'll probably just have another item for discussion and bring some folks in to talk about everything that's transpired at well 12 here over the last several months. Because it's been, it's required more work and more investigation and more money than anybody wanted, I think. But it's getting us probably to a pretty good place in the end, where if we can have the production that we need, we can have the water quality without intense treatment of the water, which costs a lot over time. And then the third thing is that using this lower well has, and we've seen this in some of the testing this week, has little to no impact on the residential wells that are nearby. So we're hoping that all of those things can line up and that the preliminary report and then the final report that come out will support all that. And the recommendation will simply be to do that liner as a change order to the well 12 contract.
Matt, I think it's a great idea to come and just give us the whole review. This has been going on for a while. And I would even give even the more historic view of how we ended up with the shallow well versus the deep well, and people forget. And it's always good to bring that in the interest of transparency of how we got to where we are.
Yep. All right, so unless there's any other questions on well 12, I just wanted to highlight a few things. We're working on a couple compliance things still with the PSC. We have this CPR report that's been due for years, actually. But we recently hired Rupert and Milky to assist in the CPR development. That was a relatively small contract, but one of the ladies that works at Rupert and Milky formerly worked at the PSC for a number of years and is very in tune with the staff and the requirements of these documents. It's essentially a historical document on all the capital expenditures and value of those assets as they stand right now. So it's difficult to piece together with the records that we have. But I think we have the right person on board to help us through that now. And then kind of similarly, we're coming up on the permit application deadline for our MS4 permit, which is our stormwater permit. And that's a very intense process, and we have Grafe on board to assist us with that. When I was looking at their hours on the proposal, it was, it's a huge number of hours that we just don't have the staff time to do in-house. It's possible down the road, with some changes that we could do that, but I think right now we're just not in the position to. So I'm very hopeful that kind of by the end of this year, we'll have applied for the MS4 permit on time, and then we'll be caught up and have that CPR report finalized as well. Then moving into just kind of department updates, we did hire a civil engineer, Joseph Harvat, started last week, Monday. So that's exciting for us. That fills the engineering section. So we now have 2 engineering techs, the village engineer and the civil engineer, all filled. In public works, we still have a couple openings, and that's the next line down. We've had trouble hiring a mechanic, and there's also a utility operator position in the water utility that's open. Related to those is that we anticipate a policy coming before you folks and then the village board regarding compensating applicants for getting their CDL. The law changed regarding commercial driver's licenses a couple of years ago. So now there's an upfront cost that a lot of people aren't able to go through, especially folks that are typically applying for our jobs. So we're entertaining the idea of compensating them for the cost of the school in exchange for committing to a number of years of service to the village.
What is the cost of that?
They're about $5,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And you can do it a couple different ways. There's a lot of private schools that are popping up now to fill that need. But you can still go traditional route like through a technical college too.
To be continued.
To be
Okay.
continued. Our DPW facility is kind of in the final stretches here. So when staff get back from the 4th of July, we're expecting that we're going to get occupancy sometime towards the end of July, but have the opportunity to start moving, really right away in July, working with more construction on, moving parts and pieces, especially inventory that might be in the yard, where we can put it out of the way. But the move is really going to begin come July here. And then once we get occupancy in either late July or early August, the push will really be on. And that's going to take quite a bit of staff time because we haven't hired movers necessarily. So we've planned a lot of our operations for the year around keeping this time open for our staff to assist with this move. And things are still on target for September 1, kind of official move in and operating out of that facility. So it's pretty neat to see that in the home stretch here.
Public open house?
Planning one, but don't have a date or anything yet.
It'll be after we start operating?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm thinking, maybe a month or so after we're in there.
Thank you.
All right, last couple notes on the report. The road program and seal coat program for this year, we're expecting those to get going here pretty quickly now, especially seal coat. Letters have gone out to a number of folks regarding seal coat and road program. The seal coat will actually start next week in some places, depending on the treatment, and continue through probably the end of July. The road program will be more tilted towards later in the summer with work probably late July into and through August. And what we're trying to do there is work around some of the water main work that's happening because those roads were planned for road work and water work in the same year or 1 year apart, which is a conflict that we've had to work through. Maple Road reconstruction, we already kind of talked about that, but that is this year. We're working on finalizing the contract, getting that pre-con scheduled so we can begin work. The Goldendale Booster Station is scheduled to start up at some point in July here to provide that higher pressure to the more elevated areas in the village. In addition, it's not on here, but I just in the last day or so got noticed that operator strike that was holding us up on the well 12 and tower 4 work ended. And now we're now expecting tower 4 to be raised. I believe it's the couple days around July 15th, but I'll get a message out about that. That'll be kind of neat to see. And I think that is it. I do have the complaint log there, but nothing has really stood out from that in the last month or so.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Any questions on anything in the report? In that case, we will schedule our next meeting. I will be out the week of August 7th, which would be our normal meeting on a Wednesday. Would it be either you can have the meeting or we can move it to the 14th? What is our preference?
I can probably do the 14th.
Can you do the 14th, Phil? Yep. Then we'll do it on the 14th at 5:30 PM in this room. Any announcements from the committee? No? At that point, then, we will adjourn at 6:27 PM. Thank you, everyone.